Alright, what's up guys? We're back, and today's video we're going to do a part 2 of vehicles I've owned, projects, stuff like that. Um, so, really the first truck I've ever owned, got into, whatever, however you want to say it. I bought a 1992 D150, or sorry, D250. It was a Cummins truck. It was a 5-speed. Um, I actually bought that in Indiana. I think I paid $2,000 for it. It was the body wasn't too bad. The bed had a little bit of rust on it. The floors had some rust that I eventually did cut out. Um, I didn't really do much to that truck. Yeah, I put a typical Cummins stuff, did exhaust, some pump modifications on the VE. That's really it. I painted it, had the windows tinted. It was just my daily. It was a good running truck. I owned that for probably 2 years, and I'll insert some pictures of that here. So that was the D250. Now, not long after owning that, well, about 2 years later, I found out I was having my first child, my son. Didn't really want to put him in a single cab. Didn't know if you were, how safe a child would be in something like that. So I decided I needed something four-door. I found a 2012 2500 Cummins 6.7 truck for sale locally. I inquired about it, found out what they wanted for it, decided to buy that truck. So I'll insert some of those pictures here, and then we'll go ahead and talk about it. But here are those pictures. Okay, so that was the 2012, the 6.7 truck. It was a really good truck. Shortly after I bought it, I sold the D250. It went to Memphis and then went to Texas, and I'm not sure where it's at anymore. I actually had tried to find it so I could buy it back. I really, really liked that truck, and I really missed it. But back to the 6.7. I bought that truck with 150-ish thousand miles on it. Bone stock truck, wasn't deleted, nothing. It was old man owned. I bought it from the original owner. It was a great truck. I bought it, deleted it immediately. Had Ryan Milliken with Hardway. I bought his tuning for it. Bought wheels and tires, stuff like that, and used it as a daily, and that was about it. I mean, I did some towing with it for my race car and stuff like that, but it was a great truck. It was a 68 RFE truck. Never had any issues with it. Um, like the second day I owned it, I actually jumped on the highway with it, and it went into limp mode, which, I had 150,000 miles. It no longer had a warranty on it when I bought it. So I was a little paranoid, that quick, and the truck went into limp mode. I pulled the codes, and it registered low rail pressure. So I was thinking it was probably the injectors, as they were probably due to be changed around then, since they were the original injectors. I got lucky. I changed the fuel filter before I dove into it any further, and the fuel filter was disgusting, to say the least. I mean, it was horrible. And I put a new fuel filter in it. Never had another issue, thankfully. Um, it Not really much to say. It was a great truck. It was quick for what it was. It was a four-door, long bed, Longhorn edition truck. It, yeah, it was great. It did what I wanted it to do. It was comfortable. It was big. But I really started to hate having a payment and realized I didn't really need something that big as my son got older. So I owned that for probably about 2 years again, and decided it was time for something different. So I had sold that truck, and actually the day I sold it to the kid from Illinois, I decided I was gonna shake things up a bit and buy something different. I've always been into Mustangs. I'm a Mustang guy at heart. I've had a bunch of them, but ever since I was a child, I've always wanted a Terminator car, an 0304 Cobra. Well, the day I had sold that truck, I found one about 2.5 hours away. It was a decent price at a dealership. I contacted them, got approved, got all that, figured out and stuff. So I sold the truck, drove up there immediately as soon as the wire transfer cleared. Drove up there, looked at it, test drove it. Was a little worried at first. During the test drive, I got it into boost, kind of lugging it a little in third, and it started rattling. So I took it back, and I had talked to the salesman about it, and he didn't know anything about it. He, I guess, thought I was trying to get the car cheaper, I don't know. So he went for a ride with me, and I showed him what it was doing. He tried to say that it was something rattling in the back. I knew better, I'm not stupid. So we got back, and I talked to the mechanic at the dealership. And I said to him, I said, did you guys put 93 in this car? Is that what's in the tank? And he said, yes. So that made me worry. I thought maybe it was just a fuel issue on a boosted car. I thought maybe they put 87 or something in it, and it was pinging, because that's what it sounded like. Well, he talked to the salesman who actually filled the car up and found out that they did put 87 in it, that it was not 93 in the tank. So I took a gamble on that car. I assumed it was pinging, but I wasn't 100%. So I took a gamble. I bought the car. I brought it home. I ran all the 87 out of it that was in it, put 93 back in it, and it was flawless. It ran fine. The pinging went away. There was no more issues. But it wasn't what I expected, I guess. I wanted one for so long. I had such high hopes for it. I mean, it was a fun car, but it was basically stock. It had a pulley, exhaust, and a tune, and it just wasn't really what I was expecting. It was fun, but it was still an old car. It had its rattles and its cheap interior, like all new edges, SN95s, whatever you want to consider that body style. And yeah, I mean, so I'll insert some pictures here and then we'll continue talking about it. So that was my 2003 Cobra. Like I said, it was a fun car. It really was. It was fun to play with. But I learned real quick that having a car seat in the back of one of those and getting my son in and out was not fun at all. The car basically set almost the whole time I owned it because it was just a pain getting him in and out. And every time I was in the car, I wanted to play with it. And I couldn't do that with him in there. So it really just set most of the time. It did eat. I only owned that car for 3-4 months maybe, and I did go through 2 alternators, which if you know anything about those cars, they're notorious for eating them up. They're in a bad spot. They get no airflow. The pulley on them isn't correct for the alternator from the factory. There's many corrections for that, but I mean, getting a big alternator was a good one, like $500. So I put a factory one back on it, and within a week or 2 weeks, it had gone bad again. I was tired of messing with it, and with not being able to really enjoy the car like I thought, I ended up just deciding to list it for sale to get rid of it. I would probably own another one, but I think if I were to do it again, I would want one that was already kind of built, I guess you could say. I don't think I'd go for another almost bone stock one. It just wasn't what I was expecting. It wasn't as quick as I thought. I mean, it was fast. Don't get me wrong. It's a raw car. There's no driving assistance, anything like that. That it was an old car. It wasn't a great daily with the alternators. Killing two of them within 3 to 4 months. I just didn't really want to mess with it. I wanted I wanted to make big power with it, have a fun street car, but I didn't want to. I spent $20,000 on the car. I didn't want to sink another $10,000 into it just to decide later on down the road that it wasn't for me and get rid of it and lose all that money. So I decided it was best to part ways with that car. And I really missed not having a truck. Not having something I could throw stuff in the back, tow, do that kind of stuff. Something that was good in all weather. Because I do live in Missouri. Once in a while we do get hammered with snow here where that car would have been useless. It was on drag radials and it would have been useless to me. So I'm not going to talk about that car anymore. That's how it is. After that, I decided I wanted another Cummins. I'm a Cummins guy. That's what I like. I know them. I know how to work on them. They're simple. They're cheap. That's what I like. So I started shopping for an older one. I was tired of payments at that point. I found a 98.5 24 valve, rust-free truck. It was in pretty good shape. It had some dents in the bed that I had popped out, but it was in pretty good shape. I drove about 2 hours to get that one. Talked to the guy. I drove it. There was some things that I was kind of iffy about, but the body was in good shape. It had 211,000 miles on it. Didn't seem to have any major issues. The AC worked, so I decided to buy it. I'll insert some pictures of that here, and then we'll go ahead and talk about it. So that was one of my 24 valve trucks. Now, I bought the truck. I drove it home. It made it. No issues. I did realize after I had bought it that the four-wheel drive was not engaging, which, if you know anything about second-gen trucks, that vacuum actuated, whatever you want to call it, on the front axle that actually connects and disconnects the four-wheel drive. I figured it was just that, so I wasn't really worried about it. Transmission shifted good. Truck always started. It ran fine. I drove it around for a while, had my fun with it, and listed it for sale for quite a bit more than I paid for it. And within the first day, somebody was here with cash to buy it. So I let the truck go. I sent that guy on his way, and he had a couple issues when he got home. It was a farm truck. Its entire life, it had sat on a farm. And I guess some mice had got to some of the wiring under the hood and chewed through something that I don't know why. While I owned it, it never affected it. But supposedly, as the guy got closer to home, the truck started losing power. I never had any issues with the truck. I don't know. I guess it's just a coincidence that something started happening as he got near his home. It turned out they chewed through TPS wiring or something, so it wasn't registering right. It started to lose power, and he had gotten that fixed. We talked for a while. I apologized. I didn't know nothing about it. I didn't own the truck very long. I owned it maybe a month or two tops. And he got it figured out, took it to a shop there and local to him. He got it figured out, got it fixed. I've never talked to the guy again. I don't know what came of that truck. I really didn't do anything to it. I realized yet again that I didn't really want a single cab. Let's see. Yeah, the truck was pretty basic. There's not really much to talk about. Yeah, I mean, that's really it. That truck just kind of wasn't for me. It's not really what I was looking for. I bought it because it was cheap. And so after I sold that one to him, I decided I wanted another first gen truck. I'll insert some pictures here. Okay, so that was my second first gen. I bought this truck. I was actually looking for a diesel, another Cummins first gen. But for those of you who do know anything about those trucks, the prices on them to find a clean one are just insane anymore. I mean, you just can't find a clean one cheap unless you get very lucky. So, as I said, I do live in Missouri. Stuff does rust here. It was really hard to find one that even was cheap, let alone, or rust-free, let alone that was even remotely cheap. So, I ended up finding a 93 D150 or W150, whatever you want to call it, a four-wheel drive truck. Truck was in very good shape. Drove, yet again, like 2.5 hours to pick it up. Everything checked out. I paid the guy. We started heading home. 5 minutes later, the truck overheated. Didn't really understand why, because it was fine before that point, till I paid the guy, basically. Go figure. So, like I said, I head down the road, 5-10 minutes maybe. I see the temperature start climbing. Truck wasn't acting weird or nothing. It kicked the check engine light on because of it, but I thought, okay, maybe the temp gauge is just bad. Maybe it's really not getting hot like it says. So I kept driving. It kept climbing. I decided to be safe, I would pull over just to pop the hood, kind of check to see if it really was overheating. I stopped, turned it off. It smelled hot, but nothing was boiling over or anything. So I let it cool for a little bit. Messaged the guy who sold it to me. Of course, he didn't know anything about it. It was fine the whole time he owned it. Typical BS. Let it cool down. I jump back in it, start driving again. Within 5 miles again, the temperature starts coming up. This time I pushed it further to see if it was overheating or not. At that point, I didn't care. I think at that point it was after midnight, and I was still 2.5 hours away from home. I just didn't care. At that point, I didn't care if it would have blown up right on the side of the road, so I just kept driving. Well, it pretty much got close to pegging the gauge, and I decided I should probably pull over. I pulled over again, shut the truck off, and as soon as I got out, immediately, I smelled antifreeze. It was boiling over everywhere, so I knew that it was overheating. So, I was alongside of a busy road. I waited a little bit, called a couple buddies. Nobody had a trailer at that point, and it was late, obviously. So, I jumped back in, drove it as far as I could again. Luckily, got to a gas station that was closed where I could pull in and kind of check it out, see what was going on. It was a gas truck. It was a 318. I went and bought a bunch of water from another gas station. Came back, filled it up, let it idle for a while. Never got hot. Never. There was no issues. So, alright, sorry about that. Had an interruption. So anyways, filled it with water, let it sit. Truck never overheated. I mean, I let it idle for half an hour, and it never even got hot. Temperature never came up at all. So I thought, well, maybe there was an air pocket or something in the cooling system that I bled that now it'll be fine. I jump in it and start driving. Immediately, as soon as I start driving, the temp starts coming up. Coming up. I pull over at another gas station. It pukes some more, at that point, water out of it. And it was probably close to 3 o'clock in the morning at that point. I had to get home. I decided to leave the truck there in the parking lot. I was a little worried that they'd have it towed or something. I did leave a piece of paper on the side window with my information on it. Call me. I'd be back for it the next day. So, we go home. Wake up early. Me and a buddy load up, his truck and trailer and head back up there. 2.5 hours. We get there, load the truck up, get it home, and I immediately started looking into what was going on. You know, my buddy Rodney, who has been in a couple videos and will be in a bunch more, is a big Dodge guy. Knows everything there is to know about 318s, 360s. He starts telling me, well, they're notorious for cracking heads. It might have cracked a head, or head gasket bad, blah, blah, blah. Well, I start looking, now that it's daylight and I can actually see, and the radiator is gone. I mean, gone. It was possibly the original radiator for that truck because it had copper end tanks on it, but the fins were just gone. I mean, there was like nothing left. So I assumed that was what was wrong. You know, and sellers told me he's never had that issue, that it truck never overheated on him, which bullshit. But got online, ordered a $100 radiator, put it in it. Truck never had another issue. Ran great, drove great, never overheated again. I decided to start fixing it up, prettying it up a little bit. Some of the stuff was faded, so I went over it and cleaned everything up. AC worked in that truck. Heat worked. I mean, the interior was immaculate, as you'll see in pictures. But I bought 22 by 12 RBP wheels for it with a 33 1250 mud train. And once again, as soon as I got the truck done, I was sick of it, wanted something different. Go figure. So, ended up selling that one, made a little bit of money off of it. And I think that brings us to pretty much right now. I wanted a diesel. You know, that 318 truck got terrible fuel mileage. I wanted a diesel. I wanted to be able to tow. I wanted to be able to get decent fuel mileage out of it and play around in it. So once again, we start looking for another Cummins. That is my current one that I already did make a video on, so I'm not going to insert a bunch of pictures and stuff here. Actually, I guess I can, because I can show you how it was when I bought it and how it sits now. So I'm going to do that right here, and then we'll get right back to talking.